All right, so we are now recording the community meeting for 1500 Clinton in the North End. And my name is Chris Brown. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Hoboken. And I'm going to turn the proverbial mic over to Councilman Phil Cohen for opening remarks on tonight's meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Director Brown. I'm Phil Cohen, Hoboken City Councilman and Chair of the Community Development Committee. Tonight, we have a community meeting with respect to 1500 Clinton Street. This is a property that has had a number of different plans and different functions in the last few years. Some people may remember it as a place where Bijou Properties, who owns the property for no cost, gave the city access to a COVID test facility. I myself got tested at that place a number of times, and it was discussed as a possible location for a community development, community center, and it is now in a new life, a new plan. We're going to hear from the current plan from the architect of the project, Dean Marchetto, who is here today, and he will tell us and walk us through the plans, which includes a community flex space, which Dean tells me is a impressive space. I'm sure he's going to show us why he believes that to be the case. And we're also going to be hearing from landscape architect Dave Lesberg, who's going to walk through the lateral park, which is going to be included in this plan. This is a project that includes two residential towers of 8 and 12 stories, and it will have some commercial space, including the flex space, and it will have the landscape architecture in the park, which I believe is between the two buildings, but I could be wrong about that. Dave's nodding yes. So with that, thank you for coming. I understand that 60 people registered for this, and there are significantly fewer than that right now. This presentation will be recorded and available on the city website. For folks who are here at the end of the presentation, you will be permitted and encouraged to ask questions. We also have our city planner, Jessica Giorgiani, with us here, as well as other folks from the planning department, RJ Theofeld, as well as Director Brown. So we'll be able to have your questions answered and have a good sense of what is in the mind of the developer and the professionals with respect to 1500 Clinton. So with that, Dean, I think I'm going to pass it on to you.
Great. So do I have the mic?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Chris. My name is Dean Marchetto. I'm an architect and a planner, and I'm principal of my firm, MHS Architecture, located right here in Hoboken. And I'm representing the developer of the project, Bijou Properties. First, let me just orient everyone to where the property is. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you see this? Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it, Dean.
Okay, great. So this is an overview of the property from Google Earth. There's a little marker here. The project is located at 1500 Clinton Street. You can see this marker, and I think I could zoom in a little bit. 15th Street is right here on the lower end. The compass is facing north. You can see here the Hoboken Field, the Sewage Authority here, Academy Bus, and 16th Street to the north end. So this is a full block piece of property. It's governed by the regulations in the North End redevelopment plan, which is a redevelopment plan that oversees the development of this this area, and particularly this block. The block is it's a full block project, and it property is just under 2 acres. What I have up on the screen now are current conditions. You can see here photographs of the existing property. And this white building is an abandoned building, but at the time during COVID, it was used for testing. but you could see the status of the block. It's mostly paved parking area with one industrial building, a one-story industrial building up in the former industrial area, the north end of Hoboken. So if you can see here on the left, this is 15th and Clinton, and on the right, it's 16th and Clinton. And then there's a view down Clinton Street on my lower left and a view on Grand Street here on the right, Grand and Clinton. So this is a Grand and 15th, excuse me. So this is just a general view of the condition. This first map is going to be explained in more detail from our landscape architect, David Lusberg, but I just want to use this map as a way of placing the two buildings on the site. Again, this is almost a 2-acre site, full block. 15th Street is on my left, 16th Street's on my right, Grand Street to the north of the page, and Clinton Street down here. And on this block, you'll see building 5A and 5B. The proposal involves two residential buildings with ground floor mixed uses. And the building on the left is a smaller building of 8 stories, and the building on the right is a taller building, a larger building of 12 stories. And before I proceed any further, I just wanted to mention that the buildings as designed are fully compliant with the bulk regulations in the redevelopment plan. And this would be a compliant building without deviations or variances needed based on the redevelopment plan bulk regulations. So this next image shows the actual floor plan layout of the buildings. The building on the left here, you can see, is set back with a wide open space in front between the building and 15th Street, and the nature of that space will be described by the landscape architect. But the ground floor of the building has full retail frontage on 15th Street. To activate 15th Street, that retail will be a very tall ceiling, maybe 18 to 20 feet tall. So you have some good size retail space opportunities here. The lobby for the building, the main entrance, will be here on Clinton Street. But the big feature here is an open space between the two buildings. The larger building is on the right, the smaller building's on the left, and it's separated by a public open space commonly known as part of the linear park of the plan. The space is 70 feet wide and it runs through the full block. So that space is activated by uses on the ground floor of both buildings. On the smaller building on the left, there's a retail space, there's a leasing space, and there's a lobby. And so those are windowed spaces with activity and lights that would make sure that this space is not a dark, closed space, but it is occupied with uses, principal uses behind the glass. And on the big building on the right, one of the main features is that there's a 9,400 square foot space in this purple color, which is a community flex space, which fronts directly on this linear park. That space is also a very tall ceiling. It has an opportunity to put a mezzanine in. It's my understanding the city is now in discussions with the Hoboken Public Library to possibly make a library branch, but this is a public space, community-oriented, that will be programmed by the city. The blue area down here is the lobby for building 5B, and the two lobbies that face each other at the opening to this linear park will provide security, lighting, and activity on this park to make sure it's safe and secure. The lobby runs along Clinton Street. There's a bike storage room here, and loading and entrance to the parking garage and mechanicals all happen on 16th Street, so that the primary uses occur on Grand, the linear park, and Clinton, and the mechanical uses and the back of house uses all come off of 16th Street. Embedded within the building and hidden from view is the parking garage, which enters off of 16th Street and goes up a ramp, and there'll be multiple levels of parking. So this is the ground floor plan. The next plan here is what we call the mezzanine plan. While these X spaces are over height, the tall height of the common spaces, the retail and the flex space in the lobby. The parking, there are 2 parking levels in that height. So you see the second level of parking here, and then the official second floor would be this. This is our first residential floor. Again, that would be the 3rd parking level, so we can accommodate all the parking that's necessary. The building has 183 parking spaces. And the parking garage is surrounded by principal use, so you don't see the parking garage from the Linear Park, Grand, or Clinton, but it's exposed only on 16th Street, which is opposite the industrial uses on 16th Street. You have the sewage authority and the electrical transformers up here. But so the second floor of the smaller building, as he starts to step back, and you see it's a building that has residential units on both sides, residential units, both buildings facing and activating the common space known as the Linear Park. I imagine this is harder to read down below, but if I were to read it to you, the left building, the smaller building, has 120 residential units. It's 8 stories. The building on the right, as you will see, is 12-story building, and it contains 262 residential units. Moving up, I come up to the 4th floor plan here, and the 4th floor plan, similar on the left building for 5A, but on the right building, the building steps back. There's an amenity deck that is exposed to the sky, and the building more or less turns into an L-shaped building as it steps back from the Linear Park, creating more open space and light flooding into the Linear Park. This building also contains an amenity space on this 4th floor, so residents of the building using a common space, a gym, a community space, will be able to go out onto the amenity deck from the 4th floor. And then moving up, this here is the typical floor on the right, the 9th to 12th floor. You see the amenity space drops off, and this becomes more of a J-shaped building with residential units on both sides of the corridor. And then as the building goes up above 8, there's a green roof on the smaller building, the 8-story building, and this is the roof plan showing the green roof and an outdoor deck up on the roof here, an amenity deck. Elevators and stairs will come up to this elevation, so the residents will be able to use the roof for an outdoor space. And then moving up to the upper roof of the 12th-story building, you see that building also has a green roof and an amenity space as well, with elevators and stairs coming up, so residents will be able to use the roof deck. If you don't have a view, you can go up to the roof and be outside and enjoy the open space and the views around the building. And this is a general elevation of what the building feels like. You could see, looking on the Clinton Street elevation, this is a 5A, the 8-story, the Linear Park, and then the 12-story on the right. There's a combination of masonry on the base and then metal and glass up above, so the building gets a bit lighter as it goes above the base. Some of the colors on the brick on the left building is opposite the Pilsner House, that beer garden building, and so we have a little bit more of a traditional color here in the red brick that gets thinner and lighter as it goes up. And then on the building on the right, which is the 5B building, the colors change, and we have more of a black colored textured brick here. And again, once you get above what would be the 3-story base, you have more of a lighter building facade with glass and metal. And then this here is the 15th Street elevation on the lower level. You can see the building here, and I'll show you a rendering of this so you can see it in 3D, but the building here has a brick base, gets lighter on the way up. And then what you see in the back is the 12-story building, which is far in the back, shown in more of a lighter rendition. And then these are the additional elevations. This is Grand Street. the Grant Street elevation showing the 5A building on the right and the 5B building on the left, and then the 16th Street elevation. And I would remind everyone here that the building has several step backs. As you can see, the building is stepped back to create a little bit more of a wedding cake sculpture. So it's not just a big solid rectangle box, but these step backs are part of the redevelopment plan requirements to help fragment the building into smaller components, and they've been successfully implemented into the design. As you can see, the step backs on all the elevations are included. The materials are listed here, the specific brick and the metal colors, window colors are all shown. More of a red color on the small building, more of a teal blue, and black brick on the larger building. And then this one is the two elevations on the linear park. This is if you were standing in the linear park looking at north at the larger building, you will see that this is a two-story flex space here, which I described earlier. It's about 20 feet high, and it has a potential for a mezzanine. And this is where the library may come, or other public use as determined by the city. And the lobby is here on the right. And then if you turn around and look at the smaller building looking south, this is what you see. You have a lobby on the left, you have a retail space and a leasing office on the linear park. But to maximize the amount of connections, pedestrian activity activating that linear park. And then this is a diagram of a cross section. So you're able to see how the floors work. As I mentioned, the parking garage on the right building is 4 stories, but it fits inside a 3-story volume. That's the mixed use portion, showing the community space on the bottom in orange, 2 levels of residential up above, stepped back. And then when you get above the garage, the back part of the building goes full up to 12 stories. And the same thing occurs here on the left. You see the step backs that are included in the project. So it steps back as it gets, as it moves away from you, as it gets up. And the retail space on Clinton Street, 2 stories in height. And then the leasing space here in this and lobby in the kind of lavender color. And so I have 2 renderings that will overall describe the look. This is a view looking west towards the Palisades, right down the middle of the linear park, with the smaller building on the left. This is the 8-story building here on the left, with the lobby here and retail on the 15th Street side. And as I mentioned, a little bit more brick on the bottom in the red color, and then it narrows up and lightens up, and it becomes mostly glass as it moves up. You can see the step backs in this 3D view. And on the right is the larger building with the 5B building, with the lobby here on the ground floor and the community flex space, all designed to activate this linear park space. The brick color changes in the back building, and so does the metal. And this building has an L shape above the base, and it goes up to 12, which you can see here. And then the final image I'd like to share is a view looking, if you were standing right on the corner of Clinton and 15th Street, you could see that there is this 2-story retail space, which will be occupied primarily, I imagine, with shops or cafes or maybe a restaurant. We don't have a retail tenant signed up yet, but the space is designed to accommodate a number of different kind of retail uses that we could have at least 2. You see the red brick, then the step back, then the brick narrows up, some detailing here in the facade to provide interest. And then once you get up above that, it steps back again, and the brick tails off and the building becomes a little bit lighter. And on the right here, looking up Clinton Street, you see the 12-story building further north, the 3-story base, the step back, and then the glass upper floors here on the right. All in all, the building is 2 buildings total, 362 residential units. There are there's 1 bicycle space for every apartment, so we have 362 382 units, 382 bicycle spaces. Again, just to be clear, the smaller building is 120 units, the larger building's 262 for a total of 382 and 382 bicycles. There's 183 parking spaces located in the larger building because of the size of the footprint, and the parking space will be available to residents in both buildings. And just to conclude, the building is, as I mentioned earlier, fully compliant with all the bulk regulations of the redevelopment plan. And once our landscape architect concludes, I'll be available for questions. So with that, that concludes my my review and summary of the building design. And I guess at this point we can share. I can have Dave Lesberg come in and present the landscape aspects of the plan. I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dean. Let me just get myself situated here. Okay, so that was great. So thank you, Dean, and thank you everyone for your time tonight. My name is Dave Lusberg. I'm the landscape architect on the project. My firm is called Arterial, and we're located in Montclair, New Jersey. We do a lot of work in and around Hoboken, and very excited to be a part of this project. So I'll walk you through the public space design now in a little bit of detail here, and then again, we're happy to answer any questions at the end. So for starters, the site is comprised of what I would refer to as three main public spaces, right? So the first is here along 15th Street, and that's comprised of the Green Circuit, which is a multi-use path that's planned by the city to sort of navigate the city, and a 30-foot setback that creates a retail promenade. The second is the central space here, which is the linear park, which is proposed in the redevelopment plan to continue through multiple sites through the redevelopment area. And the third is what's referred to in the redevelopment plan as the Clinton Street pedestrian promenade. So that's Clinton Street here. So in total, this between the central linear park and the 30-foot setback, this retail promenade, around a half an acre of the site is dedicated to public space, which I think is a really nice feature of the site. So of the total area, about a half an acre is public space. So starting on 15th Street, the first thing is the city really put a lot of focus on the importance of bicycle and pedestrian circulation in and around the redevelopment area and in and around this site. So we worked very closely with the planning department and the transportation department to design 15th Street to accommodate the Green Circuit. So the Green Circuit is comprised of a 10-foot two-way cycle track for bicycles with a 3-foot buffer from the parking. That is separated from a pedestrian zone, separated by a landscaped area from this pedestrian zone in here, which is a 30 to 36-foot retail promenade. So that promenade creates a great space for pedestrians to stroll, passive activity, shop, sit outside at the various cafes or whatever the shops might be. And we've created this bosque of trees here in the front that create a sort of outdoor living room. And that is a flexible space that can be used for cafe seating, passive activities, some outdoor things I'm sure you've seen, like outdoor ping pong or things like this. So depending on what the use is at the ground floor, this space can be flexible to that use. So going back to the Green Circuit, it circulates this way, and then it turns up Clinton Street. It also continues down 15th, but it continues up Clinton Street. So I'm going to speak briefly about the design of Clinton Street. So Clinton Street is envisioned in the redevelopment plan as a pedestrian promenade. So we have designed this portion of the street in coordination with the city to accommodate the 10-foot cycle track with a 3-foot buffer that continues up Clinton Street, buffered by a row of trees in a planting bed, and then a 9-foot sidewalk that's adjacent to the building. So this becomes overall, this is a very wide space for pedestrians and bicycles to create a nice promenade. And this ultimately, the goal would be that this connects with the adjacent property and becomes a full pedestrian promenade. So a really pedestrian priority street. So cars are still allowed to circulate up this street in one direction, but it's really the pedestrians and the bicycles are given the priority here. And then finally, I'll talk about the central park space, right? So this is a space that's about 70 feet wide by 200 feet long. So it's about 14,000 square feet. And we really wanted to include, we know the city really wants to include a lot of green space within this linear park. So we've designed a space that has these nice organic shapes, right? And these shapes would come from grade. Maybe they come up, they have some nice seat walls along the edges, and they create a nice space for strolling and these little pockets for seating and passive spaces. One of the important things here is that the community flex space essentially spans this entire edge of the park and turns the corner here. So the park itself can be designed to have an outdoor aspect of the community space, right? So depending on what this use is, the outdoor space can respond to that. So if this, we know that that a library as a use was in discussion. If that comes to fruition, then this space out here can respond to that, right? So maybe this includes, we're showing here some stepped seating that may create an outdoor classroom or something like that. Maybe some nice pockets for reading and relaxing that can really work well as an indoor-outdoor space, working with the community space. And then we're showing overhead string lighting, and the redevelopment plan outlines a goal of having some artistic features here, including artistic lighting. We think that having overhead string lighting spanning between the buildings could really be a nice way to execute that feature. So these landscape beds will be raised in portions and flush with grade in portions. They'll be filled with native plant material, including shade trees, ground covers, and shrubs. And like I said, there'll be seating pockets throughout. At the two ends of the park, you see these curb extensions that extend out into the street. And the goal there is that this park actually continues on the adjacent blocks. So these bump outs ultimately will become the connection between this portion of the linear park and the portion that's on the adjacent properties. Bicycle parking will be located throughout the site at key locations. Right now, we're showing them at several locations throughout, but that can be adjusted. And also overall, you know, we really see this as a nice, vibrant space. Lots of different activity, lots of different pockets for pedestrians and bicyclists to utilize and enjoy the space. And we see it as a great amenity. So I'll show you a few renderings. So first, I'm going to show a quick cross section of 15th Street. So this is a view, this is a slice through 15th Street looking east. So this curb line here is the south curb line, which is the existing curb line. So this cross section that you see was worked out by the City Transportation Department with their consultant team, and includes parking, 2 travel lanes, and then this is the green circuit that I was referring to. So this will be a 2-way cycle track located at the sidewalk level. So it will be not on the street. It will be at the same grade as the sidewalk, with a 3-foot buffer, 10-foot cycle track, and then a planting bed that's about 7.5 feet wide. And then from that point back is that retail promenade. So that includes pedestrian space as well as that outdoor living room that we were referring to. So that's just a quick look at the cross section. And then what this space might look like. So this is a view standing on the green circuit on 15th Street. So you can see looking down 15th, you can see the 2-way cycle track here in front of us, the planting beds, and then that sort of outdoor living room space here with the bosque of trees, some outdoor cafes and seating. Now, this is a view stepping over to the left if you were standing on the retail promenade. So here you see that outdoor living room on the right, retail promenade straight ahead. And then you can see on the other side of this planting is where that two-way cycle track would be located. So nice dedicated space for each of the uses, separating the pedestrians from the bicycles. And then this final view is from within the park space, within the linear park. So this is looking west from Clinton Street through the park. So on your right here is the community space. So you can see how this community space can open up out into the park, create some nice seating pockets for reading, outdoor classrooms, relaxation, a couple of small lawn panels for just gathering, passive activity, and really just a beautiful space to stroll through and enjoy. So that concludes my presentation. So happy to answer questions and get into more detail. And I can turn it back over, I guess, to Chris.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dean. Just great presentations. Really appreciate it. And so our next portion is going to be RJ Theofield. RJ is going to go over how the proposed development project complies or deviates from the North End redevelopment plan. So, RJ.
Thanks, Chris. Let me share my screen real quick. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So my name is RJ Theofield. I'm a planner in the Community Development Department. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting on the proposed amendments to the North End redevelopment plan that are necessary for the 1500 Clinton Street project. Before I begin, I'd want to provide a quick background on the North End redevelopment plan. As you can see on this diagram here, the plan area covers the area north of 14th Street, the 14th Street Viaduct here, and then the area west of Park Avenue. The plan envisions the area transitioning from its current industrial uses into a mixed-use neighborhood with high-quality public spaces throughout it. You can see here in the red box outlined, this is the 1500 Clinton Street project area, and it's centrally located within the North End redevelopment plan area. So the figure on this slide identifies the sites and subdistricts within the North End redevelopment plan. Each of these sites and subdistricts have their own unique goals and plan requirements. The project area for this project that we're talking about tonight is highlighted in red. It's known as Site 5 of the Linear Park subdistrict. The Linear Park subdistrict is really defined by a commercial corridor along 15th Street and a series of connected mid-block linear parks, as Dave Lesterberg was talking about, how this, Site 5 linear park will connect to Site 4 and Site 6 and 7 and so on. So at Site 5, a 30-foot setback from 15th Street and a 70-foot setback between Sites 5 and A creates two buildable areas. For this project, the main plan amendment is the conversion of Site 5A from commercial to residential mixed-use building. And this would require amendments to the floor area ratio requirements and certain plan figures. In addition, there are some amendments related to open space and step back metrics that would really allow us to document the detailed negotiations as part the details of the project that were negotiated as part of the redevelopment agreement. These aren't technically deviations from the plan, rather it's a process for the city to ensure that the plan reflects the actual project details that are being built. So the main amendment that we're going to be talking about tonight is, the conversion of Site 5A from commercial to residential. So you can see on the left diagram here, in red, Site 5A is envisioned to be a commercial building with office space on the upper floors and retail on the ground floors. And then on the right is what the proposed amendment would do. So it would change it to be the same as the building in the back. So it would be a residential mixed-use building with residential units on the upper floors and retail space on the ground floors. It's important to note that the proposal wouldn't increase the total floor area allowed on the site. It's a simple one-to-one switch of commercial space for residential, from commercial space to residential for this one site. So in order to change site 5A from commercial to residential, the minimum non-residential FAR requirements would also need to be changed. You'll note this requirement, other requirements in the North End plan set standards for baseline or incentive development projects. Whether it's the baseline or incentive is determined by the community benefits that have been negotiated by the city. So for tonight's proposal, it's an incentive project. So for the, so the minimum non-resident FAR for both baseline and incentive would go from 1.3 or 104,000 square feet to 0.23, which is 18,900 square feet. Conversely, the maximum residential floor area would need to increase to account for the change in commercial space to residential at site 5A. So the maximum residential FAR for baseline would go from 2.3 to 3.37, and incentive would go from 2.8 to 3.86. Next, I'm going to briefly go over the plan amendments that are not deviations from the plan, but rather us documenting what was negotiated as part of the redevelopment agreement. So the first of those type of amendments is that the minimum open space requirement in the plan is actually 22% or 17,600 square feet. And as part of our negotiations, we've actually increased the amount of open space provided at this project to 28% or 21,110 square feet. That's an increase of about 3,500 square feet of open space. So you can see in this diagram here, as Dave was talking about, you have that mainly comprised of the 15th Street setback on the left, and then the linear park between the two buildings here. Lastly, the amendment would also document the negotiated step backs for buildings site 5A and B. Note that the plan provides guidance for the minimum, for the mid and top level step backs, but it specifies that the actual building step backs are negotiated as part of the redevelopment agreement. So this flexibility is to help account for any slight variations resulting from specific building design factors. So what you're seeing now is for site 5A, the front building fronting 15th Street. For site 5A, the mid-level step backs that are recommended are 5 feet from all sides. And you can see on the left that they either meet that or exceed it at the mid-level, or meet that or slightly or below it on the top level. You can see here in this diagram briefly, the top level step backs on site 5A, and then the mid-level. This is looking from 15th Street, and then these are the step backs looking from Clinton Street. So for site 5B, the mid-level step back that's recommended is 10 feet from all sides. You'll see that they meet that at Clinton Street, but it's slightly less on the other sides for factors of design for the building. And then at the top level, there's recommends 5 feet from all sides, and they fully comply with that 5 feet here. And then lastly, just to go over quickly what that looks like, you'll see these the setbacks that were negotiated from 15th Street. These are the mid-level, this top level, same thing from Clinton Street. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. I think we'll open it up to questions.
Thanks, RJ. Great summary. So yeah, this is the part where we hear feedback and how we're going to do this. There is a function in Zoom webinar where you're able to raise your hand. So once we see some hands raised, we will allow you to talk, or participants to talk. So the first hand I see raised is from Chris Adair. I'm going to allow you to speak. Hey, Chris.
Hey, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for doing this presentation. I appreciate it. It's very useful. First of all, I just want to say I love hearing the fact that there's been so much focus on the green circuit. I think it's wonderful hearing that be an integral part of these new developments, particularly on 15th Street, where we know this is really going to be the first development for our northern portion of the green circuit. So I'm super happy to hear that, and thank you so much. I'm also really glad to hear that there is a bike storage room and that you're accommodating at least one bike for each resident. I would urge you to consider even upping that a little bit, because, you know, if you have a family of 4, there may be 4 bicycles there. So I would urge you to, while it's wonderful that you're definitely including that, which we haven't always had, I would urge you to increase it. And as far as the car parking goes, I would also urge you to consider taking some of that away. I think that we are, one of the things about this location that I know has been discussed in the past is to try to get a 15th Street stop light rail, which would literally be 3 or 4 blocks just to the west of this development. And the whole idea here is that 15th Street can be a corridor that can be micro-mobility, bicycles, people walking to that light rail, walking up to the ferry. So I think that we should de-emphasize the need for cars. And then the last thing I would say is, while I'm super happy to see the green circuit and the 2-way bike path, I noticed that it's only 10 feet in width, and NACTO recommends 12 feet for a 2-way bike lane. And I think it's super critical that this development, which is really the first kind of breaking ground on 15th Street, right, set the tone and show everyone else what that bike lane needs to be. And I think it needs to be 12 feet. With that 3-foot buffer, I think you had shown a diagram that showed the width of the street. It looks like there's still 2 lanes of car parking at 7 feet 6 inches, and 2 11-foot travel lanes. So I think you might be able to carve something out of that curb, whether that's getting rid of, my recommendation would be to get rid of 1 car parking lane on one side of the street. But if you didn't want to do that, you maybe make the travel lanes 10 feet or the parking lanes 7 feet. But I think you could probably get that extra 2 feet that you need. So those would
Hey,
be my
Chris,
suggestions.
we really looked into 12 feet and we really tried to get 12 feet. But I think the issue with existing utility poles there, that's kind of determining that the cycle track needs to be 10. I mean, we went back and forth with the developer a lot on this. We went over it with Director Sharp. And I think everyone tried their hardest to get a 12-foot cycle track, but in the end, I think that it would be too cost prohibitive to remove or relocate utility poles up and down the corridor. I think that's the issue.
Right, and NACTO
Yeah.
recommends 12 feet, but it goes down to it goes down significantly below if there are issues worth considering, and this is.
Yeah, I mean, it does go down to 8 feet in constrained locations, but, you know, I think that, again, I just, you know, I think that this has the real opportunity to do all the things that we didn't do on Washington, that we couldn't do on Washington. And I would hate for, I appreciate that you looked at that, but I would hope that maybe you could just take another look and see what can be done, because I think it's so important to have that proper width there.
Okay, that's fair.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your comments. So the next person who I see his hands up is Daniel Kirby. I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hello. Yeah, so I'd also like to say thanks for the presentation. It looks like a really nice development. I'm also very happy to see lots of pedestrian space and bike lanes and accommodation for micromobility. I just wanted to ask, what is your plan for controlling the level of light pollution from all these new lighting fixtures that you're talking about putting in, particularly because I live quite close to the new Wonder Lofts building that was put in at 8th and Clinton, and that block between 8th and 7th on Clinton is extremely light polluted, and it's to the point of, you know, maybe I should get an extra pair of sunglasses for when I'm coming through here at night, because it's brighter than daylight conditions.
Good
Thanks.
question.
Yep. Dean or Dave, do you want to take a
Sure, I can, yeah, I mean, if you're referring specifically to light pollution from the street lighting, not from the building itself, but I can respond to that. So, you know, obviously, from our perspective, we will comply with whatever the city would like us to comply with in terms of light levels. But as a general practice, we will certainly use dark sky friendly fixtures and things like this, and we'll, you know, we will not overlight the space more than the city requires. So, you know, that's our goal, would be to provide the minimum light level required by the city and utilize dark sky fixtures.
What about color temperature? Because the 5,000 Kelvin, you know, there's also the issue of like you're putting in all these residential units and people probably want to sleep without having to have blackout curtains. Now, I need to have blackout curtains because there's a lot of 5,000 Kelvin lights in my area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, we can work with the city and you know, comply with whatever they feel. I mean, I guess I assume there'll be LED. So in that case, yeah, we can look at that.
You can dim LEDs and tune them to be dark sky compliant.
So Dan, I really appreciate those questions. What we'll do is, I think in the redevelopment agreement, there's a process where the city will have review of the linear park. And so when we have that review between redevelopment agreement and planning board, we can sort of better hone in on the materials that are being used, such as light fixtures. But that's a really good observation.
Yeah, I was also going to say that this is just the right now before us, we're looking at a plan amendment that's going to be on for next week's agenda, as well as the redevelopment agreement itself. But then this project still needs to go before planning board for site plan approval. And that's when they'll get into the nitty gritty, you know, looking at the details of a lighting plan and the foot candles and the, you know, how much light pollution there is. And that's the opportunity really to make sure for the applicant to make sure that they're not generating light pollution, and for the board to make those conditions.
All right, thanks.
I appreciate those comments and questions. All right, so our next speaker, Liz Utreco, I'm going to allow you to speak. Hi, Liz.
Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, great. I just have a couple of questions. Are these buildings going to be rentals or condos?
These are anticipated to be rentals.
Okay. And how many 3-bedroom apartments are you planning to have in these buildings?
Dean, could you take a...
Let me focus in on that. So in building 5A, which is a smaller building, there are 26 studio apartments, 54 1-bedrooms, 24 1-bedroom with den, 14 2-bedrooms, and 2 3-bedrooms. And on the larger building, 5B, the 12-story, there are 36 studio units, 121 1-bedroom units, 29 1-bedroom with den, 47 2-bedroom, 19 2-bedroom with den, and 10 3-bedroom units. That adds up to the total.
Okay. The other question I have is there flooding that had to be considered in these plans, like any area flooding as far as mitigation that was necessary?
Well, the buildings will be designed to meet the flood requirements imposed by the DEP and administered by the floodplain coordinator in Hoboken. But I'm not aware, maybe Dave is, if there's any civil engineering issues regarding detention. I'm sure there'll be water detention as necessary required. But do you have any more information on that, Dave?
No, I don't. It's really a civil engineering question, but yeah, I think I'm not
Well,
sure.
I believe on we looked at the stormwater plans, which were submitted by Lang, and there's a detention system for about, I'd say about 50,000 gallons, approximately 50,000 gallons underneath the linear park, which would connect to, I believe it should be connecting to the storm inlet as per NHSA's policy. But that would be a civil question. I'm telling my observation from looking at their civil drawings.
And when we move to the planning board, the civil plans will be presented and reviewed by the planning board.
They're
there's
also doing a green roof that'll be about 50% of the roof
Yeah.
of the surface of the entire building footprint, which will help. And then because this is new development, they'll be able to meet the latest and greatest regulations coming from North Hudson, such as building at a first finished floor of 6 feet. And then also they'll be required to build at new street elevations that the city is currently working with an outside consultant to determine, to really help North Hudson with their street raising program, to really improve flooding conditions in the whole North End. So this will be one of the first projects that gets built at the new elevations required. And then obviously, or of course, they'll have to comply with the city's flood damage prevention ordinance as they go to site plan approval.
Okay, thank you for that information. I have just a point of clarification with the parking. So the parking is all going to be in the large building, is that correct?
Yes,
And if I wrote this down correctly, you have 183 parking spaces for 382 units, is that correct?
it's 182 parking spaces for 382 units.
Okay. And then my final question is, what was the rationale to move site 5A away from its commercial use to residential?
So that's just been a globally, nationally, the down market in office space. When the plan was developed, it envisioned office space going along 15th Street. There was I'd say it was the plan is about roughly half and half, or 49% office versus residential. We adopted the plan, or we were working on the redevelopment plan just before and through COVID. We adopted the plan with the disclaimer and the language acknowledging that COVID-19 is disrupting the office market. And I think that we're sort of in the position where the city, through the redevelopment plan, there was the desire for that office space, but just the market trends aren't pointing in that direction. And we're not sure that may very well be a very long-term direction. Whereas, the redevelopment of the North End, we're looking at the pieces such as the public open space, such as the benefits where we're getting library space. This development's also contributing to, there's a $3.2 million contribution that's attached in the redevelopment, in the proposed or pending redevelopment agreement, which would go to various items such as raising streets and possibly the 15th Street light rail. So there's other objectives that we're looking to meet with the redevelopment of the North End. So we're sort of in this position where, do we on one side, we could sit and hope that the office market comes back and then develop later, or you know, we can move forward with redeveloping the area and create a neighborhood that's vibrant and meets the overall goals of the redevelopment plan.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks for your questions.
Mhm.
Really great questions, by the way. All right. I saw Manny's hand up, and then, oh, all right. Manny's hand went down. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see any hands raised. All right. Oh, there we go. All right, Manny, I'm gonna call on you just because as there's someone else in front of me, but I saw your hand was up before, so I'm gonna allow you to speak. All right. Manuel Rivera Soler. Manny, you there? Manny, you having technical difficulties? Manny is muted. All right. Manny, we're gonna come back to you. You might be having some technical difficulties. So I'm gonna go to Lucas Kowalczyk. I hope I'm saying your name right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Lucas?
Wasn't too bad. Kowalczyk. Very close.
That was close.
Thank you. I am the owner of the Gravity Vault indoor rock climbing facility there on the north end of town. For those that don't know, on Linton between 14th and 15th. And I just wanted to voice that we are excited to really kind of finally see some additional life coming to the north end with this development. We've been in that site now for about 5 years. We were certainly more of one of the first developments in the area. We're surrounded by many vacant lots for those who kind of walk around the area on any kind of regular basis. After we opened, then obviously COVID hit, some development slowed, but understandably, but we are excited, I guess, just overall to have more commercial and residential life in that area. It looks like a very nice development. You know, I am not as versed in all of the specifics and certainly understand and respect all the feedback from other residents of the area. But just kind of globally wanted to share and voice my own opinion as a business owner of a community-based business that we're just kind of really super excited to see, you know, this kind of a community-focused development coming to the north end to bring some additional life to what has been you know, surrounded by vacant lots for the last 5 years. That's all.
Thank you. Appreciate the perspective. Thank you for your comments, Lucas. All right, Manny, I'm gonna try one more time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Hey, Manny. Yep, we can hear you.
Good, good. I'm sorry. I was transitioning from my home to my street. I have just a few questions really quickly because I know that this is preliminary and I will follow it further through the planning board. But I hear that it was rentals, but are there any affordable housing allocated on this or no?
Yep, 38 affordable units in compliance
30.
with the redevelopment, with the affordable housing ordinance.
Okay. And this would be on both buildings that you would allow these affordable housing?
Yeah,
Both buildings that are proposed? Because I have a concern.
sure. I will share your concern and then I'll.
Well, the concern is that some people that I have spoken to on Clinton Street, they're obviously grateful that they have an apartment, but they have to come into two separate, like the building is not one building, it's two separate buildings, and it's 720 and 721. And I just want to make sure that further developments, you know, people don't have to, if they're from low income or whatever, have to go around the back, up the side. You know, the complaint, you've perhaps heard it before, and I think you have because I have heard it. So that is just a concern. I'm not saying that it's happened here.
No, so Manny, let me just I see where I see where you're going.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
so your point, your question is, will the affordable units be integrated with market rate units? And the answer is yes. They will be. There's going to be no quote unquote affordable building or affordable housing entrance. It's going to be integrated with the market rate units, much like we've done with of every other redevelopment project. And
Okay.
you know, so
Well,
that's
I appreciate that then. I'll talk to you offline perhaps on the other, but anyway, I appreciate that. And the other thing is that I also would like to also appreciate the fact that there is bike, I guess, let's call it parking space for bikes. But I would suggest that no parking should be affected in any of the adjacent area of that building or those buildings in that project, because it is so difficult to park in that area right now for any visitors or even, residents who already live in the area. So my 2 cents on that in this, for the record here, even though I will voice it again in the future, but just want to make sure it's here on the record that, I hope that the developers keep that in mind. I mean, I appreciate the advice, I'm sure other members of the public want more, and if you can find a way to put it, perfect. But if it doesn't affect parking space, whatever little parking space is left there.
okay.
Did you follow?
Yep, I follow you.
That was more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And we'll take that. We'll take another look. I'm not looking at the site. To be perfectly frank with you, perfectly honest, I believe that on Grant Street and Clinton Street, well, Clinton Street's going to be there's with the pedestrian improvements that are supposed to take place. Actually, on both sides, there will be probably some loss of parking on either side. I don't know how much, but that's sort of the trade-off to some more of the bump outs and some of the pedestrian improvements that we're getting. So really, what we're trying to do is encourage encourage a more walkable neighborhood. And so some of those bump outs are kind of the trade-offs to having that on-street parking. But there will still be on-street parking. Just probably may not be as much. Just full.
That's what I'm trying to say. Let's preserve whatever you can.
Sure.
Because I heard someone say eliminate everything, but I think preserving a little bit so there is a mixture of both would better serve our residents. Because again, the bikes are great. I wish everybody had one, but what are we going to do if nobody? Pardon me, not everybody has bikes. So I'd appreciate that. And again, I will follow it because again, you said that this is in the preliminary stage of the game, because I would go in on the trees and stuff, but again, I will leave it for another meeting because I'll have plenty of questions on that one.
Yeah, this is so the next steps here are we have a redevelopment agreement on for next week's city council meeting, along with a ordinance amending the redevelopment plan. After the redevelopment agreement, the next stage would be for the development project to go to the planning board. Now, the planning board, as just mentioned, that's when they sort of get into more of the nitty gritty details. There can be language that we put in the agreement on things such as lighting, just to make sure that the intent is to have sort of more of that dark sky feel. That's more of it, some more intent that we can have. But when it comes to the specifics of what kind of fixtures and what kind of trees, that gets to the planning board level, and we defer to the planning board at that stage.
Great, Director. I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate the presentation also. And thank you so much. And I'll keep maintaining my questions ready for when it goes to the planning board and the shade tree. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Sounds great. Thanks, Manny. I see one more hand up. Leonardo Acevedo, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I think I think it's a great project. I just had one question or one issue to raise, I think, for the city in connection with the redevelopment agreement. I think as we all know, there's been significant renewal or price increases on renewals for tenants in the town, particularly with market rate units. And I do suspect that this development will, file for a 30-year exemption from the local rent control laws. But has the city considered the possibility of including some type of anti-price gouging provision in the redevelopment agreement?
So that's I would say to that where there I think what you're asking is to have mirror some sort of a rent control for the market rate units.
Yeah,
with-
yeah, sort of a voluntary agreement by the developer, to cap renewals at whatever percentage, whether it's 20% or whatever the city determines to be, unreasonable, just so it's written somewhere and agreed to between the parties, so tenants don't have to face the surprises.
So that's an interesting question. I think that we'd have to pose that to
Our
to our attorneys, because I think that, like you said, there's state statute that controls the period of rent control, and essentially we can't necessarily supersede the state statute. So the state statute says that if they file then if they file the exemption or file that exemption, then they're exempt for that 30-year period. What you're basically saying is we would enter into an agreement where they forego filing the exemption.
Well, yeah, or not even forego, but just agree to cap, renewal increases. I think, on a voluntary contractual basis, they could probably do that. But just a thought for the city to consider, because,
I think that we would need to know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that would impact our pro forma review either.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Done. Right, so I think that would be something we'd have to negotiate early on probably and take that into consideration in the pro forma review, right?
Yeah.
And then also talk with our legal department about that. Yeah,
it's something that we can consider. I don't know that we'll be able to consider that for this agreement per se, just based on the stage that we're at, but I think that it's something that's worth considering for future projects. And we'll consider that for sure. We'll have that discussion.
Great, appreciate it. Well, again, I think it's a great project. Thank you all.
Thank you. No, appreciate your questions. That's we really appreciate thoughts. All right. So I don't see any other hands raised. So I will take that as we are reaching the conclusion. So with that said, I'd like to thank Councilman Cohen for giving the introduction. I see also Councilman Jim Doyle is in attendance. I saw Councilwoman Jen Giattino and Councilwoman Tiffany Fisher were also in the attendee group, but we forgot to it was a bit of an oversight to promote them to panelists. So thank you all for attending. I would also like to thank Dean Marchetto and Dave Lusberg for their wonderful presentations. Thanks RJ for the summary, and thanks Jess for helping out with some of these questions. So with that, I would say have a great evening, and we'll be moving this to a council agenda in the very near future.
Thank you, Director.
Thanks, Councilman.
Good night.
Have a good night.